In the summer of 1837, on the outskirts of rural Louisiana, there stood an iron gate that locals avoided even in daylight. It was said the gate had been closed for so long that the hinges fused with rust, and that what was locked behind it was never meant to be released. Records from the parish ledger mention a man known only as Isaac. No surname, no birthplace, no age, just a single line written in fading ink. Transferred to Baron Etienne Rousseau for labor discipline. That same week, 6 prize bulls were removed from public auction. Each was documented as unusually aggressive, animals that had already injured handlers, animals no rancher wanted to risk. They were moved at night, escorted through cane fields, toward Rousseau's private estate. What happened next was never reported in any newspaper, but the gate closed, and by morning, the bulls were no longer restrained. The Baron's estate would later claim this was punishment, a demonstration, a warning meant to restore obedience through terror. But something went wrong, or perhaps something went exactly as it was always meant to, because at dawn, the servants found the gate still locked. No blood, no broken chains, and 6 sets of hoofprints circling calmly around a single pair of barefoot human footprints, walking forward, not fleeing. The overseer wrote in his journal that day, "They did not charge. They followed." And from that moment on, Isaac was never seen alone again. Etienne Rousseau was not a cruel man by reputation. That distinction is important because cruelty was common. Rousseau was something else entirely. He was orderly, a devout Catholic, a benefactor of churches and orphanages. His estate chapel stood taller than the slave quarters, its bell audible for miles. Sermons there emphasized obedience not as survival, but as divine alignment. Rousseau believed disorder was the true enemy of civilization. He believed chaos lived inside the human spirit and that it could be corrected, if broken properly. Letters recovered decades later reveal Rousseau's fascination with submission without force. He wrote of ancient pastoral rituals, of saints who calmed beasts, of men who commanded nature through unwavering stillness. Isaac, according to estate records, was selected not for defiance, but for silence. He was described as physically unremarkable, obedient, and unervingly calm. Overseers noted he made no requests, never argued, never begged. Rousseau interpreted this not as compliance, but resistance of a higher kind. So he designed a test. 6 bulls, no weapons, no escape, a locked gate to observe whether terror could finally reach the man's core. But fear requires expectation. And Isaac, it seemed, expected nothing at all. The night Isaac was locked inside the enclosure, witnesses later claimed the air felt heavy, as though the land itself was holding its breath. The bulls were released one by one. Each had killed before. Each had charged before. Yet none charged that night. From the observation tower, Rousseau waited for screams, for movement, for proof that the experiment had worked. None came. Instead, the bulls slowed. They circled, and Isaac, according to a servant who watched through a cracked slat, did not run. He did not crouch. He did not raise his arms. He stood still, not rigid, not defiant, still, as if listening. What followed was not domination, nor miracle, nor violence. It was alignment. One bull lowered its head. Another sat. Another exhaled sharply, then stilled. By sunrise, all 6 stood behind Isaac in a loose formation, as if awaiting instruction. When the gate was opened, Isaac walked out, and the bulls followed. Rousseau ordered them killed. The order was refused, not by the men, by the animals. Over the next weeks, something unprecedented occurred. Isaac was reassigned to general labor. No restraints, no escort, and wherever he went, fields, barns, river paths, the bulls followed at a measured distance. Always behind, never ahead. They did not trample crops. They did not charge livestock. They moved like sentinels. Word spread quickly, not as gossip, but as unease. Church attendance rose. Confession lines grew longer. Sermons shifted tone. Priests spoke of humility, of man's false belief in mastery over creation. Rousseau grew withdrawn. He began recording dreams of hooves echoing in cathedral halls, of animals kneeling where men should kneel, of gates opening inward. One night, the Baron attempted to confront Isaac alone. No one knows what was said, but afterward, Rousseau ordered Isaac removed from all records. His name scratched out, his existence denied. Yet the bulls remained, and they did not leave. The first disappearance was an overseer. No signs of struggle, no blood, just footprints. His own, walking calmly into the tree line. Others followed. A priest, a stable hand, a visiting magistrate. Each time, witnesses reported the same detail. They were not dragged. They were accompanied. By the end of the year, locals began locking doors at sunset, not out of fear of attack, but of invitation. Because some claimed that if you stood still long enough, if you let go of authority, if you released the need to command, you could hear footsteps behind you. Measured, patient, waiting, and always 20 hooves. 5 miles from Rousseau's estate stood St. Agath's orphanage, a limestone building funded almost entirely by the Baron himself. Officially, it sheltered children displaced by floods and illness. Unofficially, its records were incomplete. Beginning in 1838, parish notes describe a troubling pattern. Children stopped crying. Not gradually, not with age, all at once. Caretakers wrote of rooms filled with children sitting upright through the night, eyes open, listening. No nightmares, no tantrums, no laughter, just attentiveness, directed toward the road that led back to Rousseau's land. One nun recorded something she could not explain. They rise when the bells do not ring. On certain mornings, staff would find small muddy footprints in the courtyard. Not scattered, aligned, always pointing outward. When questioned, the children spoke in the same phrasing, regardless of age. He walks without asking. They follow because he does. The orphanage chaplain attempted an exorcism. The children watched silently, and afterward, refused communion, not in defiance, but as if it were unnecessary. Within 2 years, St. Agath's closed quietly. The children were relocated. No destination was ever recorded. The church did not denounce Rousseau. It adjusted. Sermons across the parish began emphasizing stewardship over dominion. Priests stopped preaching about man's superiority over beasts. Instead, they spoke of submission to divine order, vaguely, cautiously. Private correspondence between clergy reveals fear, not of Isaac, but of recognition. One bishop wrote, "If obedience can be withdrawn without rebellion, then what authority remains?" Confessionals became places of hesitation. People admitted not sins, but doubts about command, hierarchy, and punishment. Some claimed they felt calmer near Rousseau's land. Others claimed their livestock no longer fled storms. The church archives show a directive issued in 1841. Do not speak of the man. Do not describe the animals. Refer only to the condition. Because conditions could pass, names could not. By the 1840s, Isaac no longer appeared to age in witness accounts. This was not written as a miracle, but as confusion. Men who swore they had seen him years earlier described the same posture, the same pace, the same expressionless calm. He was never hurried, never delayed. He did not speak publicly, but when he did speak, always privately, people complied. Not because they were ordered, but because the request felt final. Estate workers began rearranging their lives without explanation, leaving positions, abandoning property, walking away from debts, always in the same direction, toward the woods, toward the bulls, toward silence. No one ever reported seeing Isaac eat, but they reported seeing the bulls lower their heads when he passed. Baron Etienne Rousseau's final journal entry was dated November 3, 1844. It read, "I sought obedience. I found reflection. He does not command them. He removes the need to be commanded." That night, Rousseau dismissed his guards. He rang the chapel bell himself. Witnesses heard it toll exactly 20 times. At dawn, the estate gate stood open. Rousseau was gone. No footprints led away. Only a single set led inward, toward the enclosure that had not been used in years. Behind it, the ground was perfectly smooth, as if nothing had ever struggled there. In the decades that followed, census records from surrounding parishes reveal an anomaly. Exactly 20 individuals vanished without legal dispute. No heirs, no claims, no investigations pursued. All had one thing in common. They had been present, directly or indirectly, the night the gate first closed. Locals stopped using the old road. Children were warned not to stand still too long in open fields. And hunters reported something deeply unsettling. Animals watching them without fear. Not stalking, observing, as if waiting for a signal that would never come again. By 1902, the land was abandoned. By 1921, maps no longer labeled it. But travelers still report a sensation when passing the area, a feeling of being allowed to leave. Because somewhere beyond the trees, something learned long ago that domination is temporary, and submission, once chosen, cannot be revoked. In 1917, a junior archivist named Thomas Calder was assigned to reorganize flood-damaged parish records in Baton Rouge. He was not searching for Rousseau. He did not know the name. But certain documents resisted categorization. Pages reappeared after being filed. Ink bled through unrelated texts. Margins carried repeated impressions, as if the paper had once been pressed against something heavy and breathing. Calder noted an irregular symbol appearing across decades of records, a small, hand-drawn circle followed by 4 short vertical lines. Always in the margins, always near erased names, always unreferenced. When Calder cross-checked land deeds, orphanage rosters, and estate inventories, the same absence appeared again and again, entire lives removed with surgical precision. No disputes, no court cases, no surviving kin. Calder wrote to his supervisor asking permission to pursue the pattern. The response came back stamped but unsigned. This matter resolves itself when left alone. Calder did not leave it alone. 3 weeks later, he vanished while walking home from the archive. His notes were returned to his desk the next morning. Refiled. A state inquiry was quietly opened in 1923 after multiple reports of unexplained livestock behavior near the former Rousseau lands. Farmers described cattle abandoning fences, horses refusing riders, dogs sitting silently at tree lines for hours, watching nothing. Investigators found no evidence of trespass, no cult activity, no gatherings, only paths through the woods worn smooth by repetition. The lead investigator, Harold Menzies, documented an unsettling consistency. No signs of coercion. Whatever is occurring, participation appears voluntary. Menzies interviewed an elderly woman who claimed her grandfather had once worked on Rousseau's estate. She told him. He said the man didn't free anyone. He showed them they were already free. The report was sealed. Menzies resigned weeks later. His final recommendation was a single sentence. Do not define this as a threat. Threats require opposition. No skeletal remains of the bulls were ever found. No mass grave. No evidence of slaughter. Hunters claimed the forest grew quieter after dusk, not emptier, but restrained. One ranger wrote in 1936, "The animals move as if aware of an unseen boundary." Tree growth patterns near the enclosure site showed strange regularity, circles of untouched ground, as if the soil itself refused intrusion. Local folklore attempted explanations. Some said the bulls wandered into the marsh and sank. Others claimed they were sold south. But elders dismissed those stories. They said animals that learn to follow do not forget. They wait. The final credible sighting occurred in 1948. A freight conductor reported seeing a barefoot man walking parallel to the tracks at dawn. 20 paces behind him, a procession of large shapes moved in silence. Not charging, not threatening, keeping distance. The man never looked at the train. He walked as though direction itself belonged to him. The conductor slowed. The man stopped. And the shapes behind him stopped too. The report ends with a single unsettling observation. I had the strongest sense that if I stepped off the train, they would make room for me. By 1950, all official interest ceased. The land was classified as unsuitable for development due to environmental instability. But people still avoid standing still there. They keep moving. They keep asserting purpose. Because the old belief persists that if you pause long enough, if you release the need to control, if you stop insisting on direction, something patient may gather behind you. Not to harm, not to rule, but to follow. Every attempt to explain Isaac eventually collapsed under the same mistake. They tried to define him as a leader, a prophet, a rebel, a symbol of vengeance. But the records, what little survived, suggest something far more unsettling. Isaac did not organize. He did not persuade. He did not promise freedom, salvation, or justice. He removed pressure. Witnesses repeatedly described the same sensation in his presence. The absence of expectation. People did not feel watched. They felt unburdened. Animals did not feel threatened. They felt uncommanded. This is why institutions struggled to respond. Power depends on resistance. Authority requires tension. Isaac offered neither. He did not oppose domination. He revealed its irrelevance. And once seen, Irrelevance cannot be unseen. Governments erase threats. Churches erase heresies. But Isaac was neither. He represented a failure in the system's logic. If obedience could dissolve without rebellion, if hierarchy could become unnecessary, if fear could be rendered optional, then punishment loses meaning. Slavery loses justification. Discipline loses urgency. Even faith, when tied to fear, loses leverage. So Isaac could not be condemned. He had to be forgotten. Names were scratched out. Maps simplified. Archives quietly edited. Not to hide violence, but to prevent recognition. Because recognition spreads faster than revolt. The gate where Isaac was locked still exists, though no marker identifies it. It was never destroyed, because it was no longer needed. The gate was built to contain chaos. What emerged instead was stillness. The enclosure did not fail. It succeeded in revealing something the Baron never intended to test. That control is loud. That dominance is exhausting. That fear requires constant renewal. But alignment, once found, requires nothing at all. The gate did not imprison Isaac. It exposed the lie that he ever was. The number appears again and again. 20 hoofbeats. 20 tolls of the bell. 20 missing names. Scholars once tried to link the number to ritual, to scripture, to numerology. They failed, because the number was not symbolic. It was incidental. Those 20 were simply the ones who stopped resisting first. They were not taken. They stepped aside. And once they did, something ancient recognized the opening. Not evil, not holy, just old. Older than ownership, older than chains, older than the idea that order must be enforced. Today, the story survives only in fragments. In orphanage silences. In church sermons that avoid certain words. In animals that refuse commands from nervous hands. And in the unease people feel when standing too still in open land. Because the truth buried beneath Rousseau's estate was never about a man who controlled beasts. It was about a world that discovered, briefly, that control itself was optional. That freedom does not always arrive through struggle. Sometimes it arrives through stillness. And sometimes, something notices. This has been the Forgotten Files. Not a warning, not a legend, just a record of what happens when nothing is forcing you anymore. And you finally notice what has been patiently waiting behind you all along.